What's up, guys? It's Thursday, June 23rd, and you're listening to Rick's Take.
They talking crazy to me. They talking crazy to me. They talking crazy.
Today, I want to talk about former Covington Catholic head coach Mike Listerman. Now, as you probably know, he stepped down at the end of the season, and there's been a lot of talk of whether he was forced to do that or whether he wanted to do that. But regardless of what happened at that point, it's clear that he wanted to continue coaching. And he's going to do just that, as he has signed on to be a varsity assistant at Holmes next year. He's also going to teach math at Holmes. And I reported this about a week ago. The Enquirer just ran a story on it yesterday. And I wanted to talk about this today because I think everyone's kind of missing the big picture here. Everyone is harping on the CovCath versus Holmes aspect of this and the rivalry and what the Colonel Crazies are going to do when Holmes and CovCath meet up this year. And in reality, that's the smallest part of what this means for Northern Kentucky basketball as a whole. This is much, much bigger than that for the rest of Northern Kentucky. Let's just look at Listerman's credentials. 11 seasons as a varsity head coach at Covington Catholic. He has 25 years total coaching at CovCath. He was an assistant for 14 years. He had 6 district titles in his time as a head coach, 2 regional championships, a 2004 state semifinal appearance, and 230 wins all time, which is second at the school. Now, when you look around the rest of Northern Kentucky, it's going to be pretty tough to find another varsity assistant who has that type of success and that type of experience at the varsity level. And the interesting thing to me is you're taking Jason Boer, who hasn't been around. He was at Shelby Valley, won a state title with them before he came to Holmes. He hasn't been around. No one's really seen him coach for the most part around Northern Kentucky. No one's watched his team year after year, played against him, and gotten a feel for what type of things he likes to do. No, on the flip side of that, he doesn't have that experience to draw from either. He doesn't know what the other coaches, their tendencies are, what type of systems they like to run. But Mike Listerman sure as heck does. And he's been doing that and really scouting teams well and understanding what other teams are going to run for the past decade. And I can tell you right now, I know what most Northern Kentucky coaches are going to run just from watching them year after year. I know their systems pretty well. And Mike Listerman knows a whole heck of a lot more about basketball than I ever will. So you add a guy like this to your bench, and he's not being asked to coach the JV team. He's not being asked to coach the freshman team. He's being asked to be a varsity assistant. And that's really, as a head coach, that's really the guys that you lean on at the end of games. It's the guys you lean on in the timeouts. It's the guys you lean on at halftime. And you're asking for adjustments. You're asking for them to see things, whether it be what the other team's doing defensively, what might work against them, or even on the offensive side of the ball. Hey, how do we stop this certain guy? Mike Listerman is perfect for that situation at this point in his career. Can he still be a head coach? Absolutely. But at this point, he's not going to be asked to do that. And I think it's going to be great for both parties because, for one, it's going to be a refreshing role for Mike Listerman. He doesn't have to deal with the day-to-day operations of a head coach. And as any coach can tell you at the high school level, being the head coach means so much more than the X's and O's and the basketball side of things. In fact, that's a very small percentage of the job. You're really worried more about the day-to-day, the problems, the school issues, all that type of stuff is what you're worried about as the head coach. So being the fact that he's just going to be the varsity assistant is really going to be refreshing for him, I think. It's going to be a less stressful role and a role where he can really get back to what he loves doing, which is teaching players the game and also the X's and O's of basketball, doing things like scouting. And just think about that in itself. Sending Mike Listerman out to scout, that's going to be a huge, huge asset for the Holmes staff. When you can send a coach like Listerman, who's been on the scene for the last 25 years and a head coach for the last decade, and watched every coach in Northern Kentucky, he knows what they like to run already. He knows their systems. And now he's going to be able to sit there and scout for you and bring it back to you and say, okay, here's what I think will work. Here's what I think won't. That's going to be a great resource for Coach Boer, especially since he is new to the area. And finally, you're probably sitting there thinking, okay, well, if it's not going to affect the CovCath Holmes game, then who is it going to affect? And when you look at Northern Kentucky this year, you've got Dixie up at the top. And you've got everybody else sort of thrown in there from 2 to 10, and it's pretty wide open. So who this affects is those teams like Newcath, Boone County, the teams right there in that second tier, right behind Dixie, who think they have a chance to contend for regional title this year, well, you throw Holmes into that mix because they're always talented enough to be in that top 3 or 4 schools in Northern Kentucky, and you add just a slight advantage possibly. I don't know how much of a difference it's going to make. Maybe it wins them a couple games this year. Maybe it wins them none, but it gives them a slight advantage. Regardless, I think if you're a team this year in Northern Kentucky that's going to be in that second group, which Holmes will be, and you're trying to compete for a regional title, you like your odds a little bit better when you add a guy like Mike Listerman onto your bench. That's why I think this is a much bigger deal for the rest of Northern Kentucky. Guys, thanks for tuning in and listening. I'm going to be trying to do these things more often on a regular basis on the blog, so please keep checking back for more of these. If you have comments on what I just said, please leave them in the comments below, or you can email them to NKySportsBlog@gmail.com. Also, if you have questions, we'll be doing mailbags. I'll answer your questions. You can send them, again, in the comments below on this blog post, or email me at NKySportsBlog@gmail.com. If you're viewing this on YouTube, please click over to the blog. It's NKySportsBlog.com, and you can leave your comments and questions there.
They talking